Test anxiety happens when somebody doesn't feel prepared and they're not confident. If you follow this plan, you're going to feel so confident. You're going to feel like almost zen and calm when that exam is being passed out. And some students even are going to start enjoying taking tests if you follow this plan. So I was giving an exam a couple days ago, and I was kind of looking around at students to see how they were doing on the test. And even before we started the test, I took notice of two students in particular. One of the students had this huge stack of note cards, and she was feverishly going through them. You could tell she was really anxious. She was still filling out some of the note cards. I noticed like half of them were blank. And you could tell she was really nervous about the test. There was a lot of anxiety there. And I even felt tense just looking at her. And then another student, not even studying anymore, totally calm, ready to go, just ready to take the test, and almost like looked like at peace, ready to take the test. And afterwards, when I was grading the test, it was a huge difference. The one that was zen, calm, she did amazing on this test. And meanwhile, the one with this huge stack of note cards, which you would think means that she's been studying and prepared, totally failed. So it led me to think, hey, we need to talk about how to study. What are some strategies to study? And this is a question I get all the time from my students. Now, believe it or not, even as a professor, I still have to study. I have to study a lot. Before every single lecture, I study and relearn all the material. There's a lot of lectures, if I'm teaching a new class, that I have to learn something maybe from scratch or something I haven't learned for 10 years. So I need to be able to learn stuff, and I don't have a lot of time. So I need to be able to learn it fast, and I need to be able to be comfortable enough with it that I can like teach it to other people. So I need to be very comfortable with it. And of course, I also have talked to a lot of students and ones that do really well on tests. And I have figured out the best method for studying for tests. So in this video, I'm going to go through, if you really want to become a serious student and do well on tests and not feel anxious anymore, get rid of that test anxiety. This is the plan that I would use for studying, and it's the one I use anytime I need to study for something. Okay, the first step to becoming a really awesome test taker and to actually learn the material is make a plan. Now, my students and you guys, a lot of you are science students, so you're probably pretty type A, and this is probably your favorite part. A lot of us love to plan. I've seen some amazing, very organized journals and planners and online planners, and they're color-coded and they look amazing. So this might be the fun part for you. Make your plan of when you're going to study. Now, here are some of the things people don't think about when they make their plan. A lot of students, when they know they have a test coming up, they plan the whole day before, or maybe 2 days before, to just study, and cram all the material. Now, here's the truth. You have a limited attention span. A lot of people say that time is your most precious resource, but I argue that attention is way more precious than time. You could have 2 full days open on your calendar to study for a test, but just because you have all that time doesn't mean you're going to have attention to study for 2 full days. And I relate this because I'm a runner to marathon training. I could have 2 whole weeks before my marathon to do nothing but run. But there's no way in the world you could just keep running for 2 weeks and be ready to train for a marathon. You'd get injured. You'd like break your leg. You'd be so tired. You'd have no energy to keep running, and you would be so sick of running too. You would not be prepared. So you really need to treat studying as if it's like a marathon training plan, and you need to plan out multiple days every week to study. And I'm not saying you need to study all those days because, again, remember, you only have a limited attention span. You have a solid 2 hours of strong attention in the morning and a solid 2 hours of strong brain energy, attention, focus available later in the afternoon, not right after lunch. That's actually the worst, one of the worst times for brain energy, but maybe a little bit later, like between 4 and 6 p.m. So, if you're going to be planning out blocks of time for studying, plan 2 hour chunks in the morning or in the afternoon when the brain energy is at the highest, and this might vary for you depending on your schedule. So put these time blocks for studying in your planner now and make it so that you can fit this in multiple times a week, and you'll be successful there. A lot of students, they want to study from home or from their dorm or where they live, and I can promise you, you are not going to effectively study at home. There are way too many distractions, like you'll start going to get a snack, you'll go want to watch TV, you'll want to go on the phone. Now, those are your personal distractions, but even worse is that when you're home, everybody else around you at home, your kids, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, if you live in a dorm, all your friends, your roommates, your pets, they now think you're free and you're available. You're home, you're available for them. But in reality, you're not available. You have blocked out time for studying. This is your study time. This is not your available time to go help out everyone else around the house. So being home is not going to work. And I promise you're not going to get any studying done. It's the worst thing you can do because remember, your attention is super limited. When somebody interrupts you while you're studying to go help them do something, your attention, that precious energy that you only have such limited amounts of every day, is now diverted to this new task that you're going to go help them with. And it takes more energy to divert to this new task than it would have if you just sat down and kept focusing on what you're studying. Then you're going to try to go back from that task you were helping somebody with, go back to study again. You're again switching that task, switching that attention, and it's almost like you're going to have to start over. And now you've lost so much of that precious time and energy and brain power, and it's just making it worse. So you need to find a designated spot for studying that's not home. So that could be for maybe you a coffee shop. Some people do really well with some of the background noise of a coffee shop. I do well with that kind of stuff, and I don't get distracted by it. Some people like the coffee shop idea, but the background noise thing doesn't make sense. So I've heard a lot of people go to like Barnes and Nobles to study, or to the library at your school, or like a study room at your school. You just need to find that space, and it cannot be your house. So when you put your study time in your planner, you got to treat this like it's an appointment. Like if you had a doctor's appointment that you knew was going to be from 9 to 11 a.m. on Saturday, you would be there, and you would go physically be there, and you wouldn't let anything interrupt you. So when you put your study time in your calendar, you need to treat this like an appointment that you cannot cancel. You've now committed to it. Now, a lot of people ask like, hey, what if I need to take a break while I'm studying? Breaks are totally great, especially maybe between each unit that you're working on for the day. So maybe every half an hour. There's a difference between taking a break and totally shifting your attention and shifting that brain power to another thing. For a break, you're not turning off that brain energy and switching tasks. Your brain is still on the studying that you're doing. It's still focused. So like if you're going to go get a drink of water, it's going to take like a minute or two. If you're going to go to the bathroom, if you're going to go get a coffee, if you're going to just stretch your legs, you're not having a conversation with somebody. You're not getting distracted with another task. Your brain hasn't taken the break. You've just physically gotten up and walked around and took a physical break. The minute you start having a conversation with someone else, your brain energy is now going away from the studying and onto that next other task that's not studying. So try to avoid any conversations with anybody while you're taking your break. Just go do your break, come back, refocus. Don't switch that brain energy, because that's how you're going to lose attention. If you want to become a serious college student and not feel that test anxiety anymore, you need to do this and you need to commit to it. Would you rather take those couple hours every week now to commit to studying, or feel that horrible feeling of anxiety that you hate so much and still maybe not do very well on the test and have to repeat this class over again another semester? I'd rather take the 2 hours now and really actually learn the material. Now that you have your solid plan, you know where you're going to be doing your studying, and you have those blocked out time hours that you're going to go study, you're ready to move on to phase 2, and that's actually executing the studying itself. So the first thing you're going to do when you're studying is you're going to read, and that could be reading the book, reading papers. If you don't have actual book for your class, I'm sure your instructor has given you some type of handout, notes, or PowerPoint, or maybe you took notes during lecture. You're going to read everything you can. While you're reading in this initial phase, you're not taking any notes. You're just focused on reading. After you've gotten through the reading that you're going to do, and again, you're not trying to read an entire chapter or like 4 chapters in a day. You've broken this up into reasonable pieces that you think are going to take about 2 hours. So in my experience, this is usually about half of a chapter in the textbook. Now that you've read through everything, now you can go back and write down notes or highlight things that you really know that you're going to need to spend a lot of time on. And this could be areas when you were reading that you started to get lost. You were like, this is where I got lost, so I know I'm going to need to spend more time here. Or it could be like, I remember my professor saying this was really important, so I'm going to spend more time on this material than maybe on some of this other stuff that may be more like common sense or stuff that you've heard before that you kind of already know, or that you know is not going to be as heavily focused on. After you've done your reading and you've gone back, taken notes, and written down things that you know you need to spend more time on, now I think you need to go to YouTube, or if your professor has lecture videos, and you need to hear it. Now, reading it is one thing, but when you actually listen to it and hear the words, that's when it's really going to stick. That's when you're like, okay, I didn't know what that word was. Now I'm hearing it and it's starting to make sense, and I'm hearing the language that's being used, and I can start processing it. And while you're watching these lecture videos, you're really taking notes and you're making drawings. I am shocked to see how many students avoid making any kind of drawings in their notebook. You do not need to be Picasso or like a famous artist to be making drawings. Making drawings and flowcharts and arrows and things like that, this is how things are going to stick. Because when you're on the test, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember drawing that complex thing out, and that's when it really sticks in your mind. So while you're watching the videos, make your own drawings that are going to help you to remember the processes of things. Now, during this stage, this is where a lot of students are focusing on the wrong thing. A lot of students think it's important right now to start memorizing. And they're like, oh, I can't remember all of these terms. And they start making flashcards, and they just start trying to like memorize vocabulary as if it's like a spelling test. At this stage, vocabulary doesn't matter at all. Vocabulary is just like made up words. So for example, I was recently giving a lecture on the cardiovascular system, and I was reviewing the circuits of how blood flows through the heart and then through the body, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. And I needed to remember, where's the oxygen-rich blood, where's the unoxygenated blood. And it was important for me to make these drawings and to show myself the flow of blood throughout the heart and throughout the body, to remember the steps of these circuits. It would be really easy for me to say, hey, I don't know the names of all of these valves and arteries and veins and chambers. How can I learn all this if I don't have all these vocab words down? But that's not really what's important. What's important first is that you understand the process and the reason for why this has to happen this way. Later, much later, I can go back and learn these useless vocabulary terms that, they are important, because if you're going to be a nurse, you need to know the different parts of the heart so that when you hear other people talking about it, you know what they're talking about. But for the sake of understanding the process, vocabulary words are not important right now. Now that you've executed the actual studying, you feel good about the process, you've made drawings, you've taken notes, you've made flow charts, you think it's clicked in your brain. Now we can move on to step 3. And step 3 is to teach what you've learned to somebody else. Now what I find, and this is true for a lot of things in life, about 80% of the material is going to click with you and you're going to feel pretty good about it. But then there's going to be about 20% that you don't quite feel 100% on. It's the 80-20 rule. And usually that 20% that you find the most challenging is the most important stuff. So whatever that 20% is for you, this is the stuff that you want to go back and reteach it to somebody else. What I always do first is I just teach it to myself. And I don't use any notes or anything, and I'm just going to go on paper, make a drawing, make a flow chart, and wherever I get stuck, that's where I'm going to stop. Now I can go back to my notes and figure out where I got stuck and why. Maybe I need to reread the book at this point. Once you've been able to teach it to yourself, you want to make sure what you're teaching to yourself is actually correct. And we have an amazing tool available to us now. It's called ChatGPT, or, other AI tools. This is where I think AI is amazing. I don't think AI is great if you're like, hey, AI, teach me the heart. Because you're not going to take anything away from that. Your professor already did that. They already told you about the heart. You zoned out the first time. You're going to zone out again with AI. Where I think AI is great is when you want to teach it to them. So I literally will go on to ChatGPT, like for example, the cardiovascular system, the pulmonary systemic circuit, oxygenated, unoxygenated blood. I will type out the whole process from my memory without looking at any notes into ChatGPT, and I will say, I'm studying for a test and I need to know this circuit. Will you tell me if I'm missing anything important or if I got anything incorrect? And it will tell you, and it'll do a very good job breaking down if you really messed something up or if anything's incorrect. And here's a couple of quick things. As you guys probably know, ChatGPT cares a little bit more about the vocabulary. So at this stage, you could start learning those vocabulary terms that you may be missing before. The deeper you get into things and the more advanced you are in your career and in your college life, ChatGPT might get some things wrong. So like recently I was teaching an immunology lecture and I was asking ChatGPT about T cell development, and it was a pretty advanced topic, and I actually noticed some of the things it was saying were a little off, and I actually said, hey, I don't think this is correct, and ChatGPT actually was like, oh yeah, you're right. So if anything looks suspicious, ask it, hey, are you sure about this? But otherwise, for basic stuff like the cardiovascular system and the flow of blood, this tool should be really good at helping you out. Now, another thing you could do is you could form study groups with other students in your class. Now, here's the problem with study groups sometimes is people tend to study with people they feel comfortable with and people they know. But what you really want to do is find the best students in the class, the top students who always get A's on their tests, and you're going to say to them, I want to study with you. You are going to be most similar to the people that you hang out with. So hang out with the smart kids and find out what they're doing. Now, when you form your study group, now's a great time to teach each other. So you're going to tell your friend that you're studying with, I'm going to teach you the systemic circuit of the heart. And then you're going to teach me the pulmonary circuit. And then you guys can figure out if you're missing anything. And this is the best way to study I've ever seen. When I see groups of students doing this, this is when the real learning is really happening. And the key is you guys need to go into the study group having already done all of these other steps beforehand. If you all go in totally clueless, then no one's going to get anywhere. It's going to end up just being a gossip fest, So go in having already prepared and ready to teach each other. And then, of course, you can always reteach the things that you're still struggling on to your professor. That's what they're there for. Don't do it like an hour before the test because the professor's just going to be annoyed by that. Find office hours within a day or a couple days before the test. So now you've already prepared so much. Now go to them and say, hey, I'm struggling with remembering the full cardiovascular circuit. Can I teach it to you and make sure I didn't miss anything? And don't forget, they're the ones that made the test, so they're going to tell you if you missed anything key. And this is a great thing. What professors don't want you to do is go in and say, I have no clue where to study, I'm lost. Because they've already taught the material and they don't want to have to do that all over again. What they want is you to come in with a very specific question or say, hey, I want to teach this to you and you're going to tell me what I'm missing. That is the greatest thing, and that's what your professors really want you to do. Okay, now you're almost done. You're ready to take the test. The test is coming up tomorrow. You're on to step 4, and this is the review step. Now, this is the step where the flashcards, the vocabulary, that kind of stuff comes in. So here is the step where you're going to write down those vocabulary words that you keep forgetting on a note card and review them. Another great thing to do here is go back to that ChatGPT prompt that you put in a couple days ago. This is now like a permanent thing. You came up with this. You taught this. So when you reread this, it's going to trigger that memory in your brain. Oh yeah, this is how I explained this thing and it makes sense to me this way. You can actually keep these forever because I guarantee you're going to have another class where you're going to learn about this again, and you've already learned it, so you can just re-look back at what you learned. Or if you have a final exam at the end of the semester and you need to relearn it for that exam, that's a great place that you're going to go back and look at these tools that you've used. Now, I know it seems like a lot, but in reality, this is the fastest way to actually learn something, and you'll probably also have fun doing it, and you'll feel super confident going into the exam. And I guarantee for the first time, you won't feel that anxiety. You're going to feel prepared. And not to mention, it's not all about the tests. You're also actually learning material. Please follow for more tips and advice, study tools, and lecture content. Check out my website, microjess.com. I have tons of study guides, practice quizzes, and I have all my YouTube videos for all various science classes available there.